Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a huge development that could change the course of the war, the collapse of Russia's so-called land bridge. This event has shaken up the front lines, disrupted critical supply lines, and left analysts wondering what comes next for both Russia and Ukraine. In this video, we'll unpack what really happened, why it matters, and how this could shift the dynamics of the war moving forward. The term land bridge has been used a lot since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It refers to the vital overland corridor that connects mainland Russia to the occupied Crimean peninsula through southern Ukraine. This corridor has served as a major supply route, allowing Russia to move troops, weapons, fuel, and supplies to its forces in occupied territories. When we talk about the collapse of this land bridge, we're not just talking about one structure physically falling apart. We're talking about the breakdown of a key logistical artery that has kept Russian forces in southern Ukraine operational. For months, Ukraine has been targeting bridges, railways, and transport routes that make up this corridor. Each strike chips away at Russia's ability to sustain its occupation in southern Ukraine. Now, recent reports and satellite images show significant damage and disruptions along the main supply lines. Several bridges have been destroyed or rendered unusable. Railway links that connect Crimea to mainland Russia through Melitopol and Tokmak have been heavily hit. Supply convoys have been forced to take longer, more dangerous routes under constant drone and artillery fire. This collapse is not just about infrastructure. It's about control, movement, and survival on the battlefield. Without reliable land routes, Russia's southern front, especially in Crimea, Zaporizhia, and parts of Kherson, becomes vulnerable. Supplies have to come either through the Kerch Bridge or by sea, and both those routes are under increasing Ukrainian pressure. The Kerch Bridge has already been hit multiple times since 2022, and every time it takes damage, it exposes how fragile Russia's logistical lifeline really is. Let's think about what that means on a practical level. Armies run on logistics. Tanks don't move without fuel. Artillery can't fire without shells. Troops can't fight without food and medical support. When those systems start breaking down, even the largest army can find itself at a disadvantage. What we're seeing now is that Russia's forces in southern Ukraine are being forced into a dangerous position where resupply is unreliable and reinforcements are delayed. Ukraine has been methodically targeting this land bridge for months. Precision strikes from HIMARS systems, British Storm Shadow missiles, and now longer-range ATACMS have been used to disrupt railways and depots. Each successful strike creates a new logistical bottleneck. As more of these routes collapse, the cumulative effect starts to show: slower troop movements, reduced artillery fire, and strained morale among Russian forces. Ukrainian intelligence has reported that some Russian units in the south are struggling to maintain steady supplies of ammunition and fuel. This development is also a psychological blow for Russia. The land bridge has been portrayed in Russian media as one of the key achievements of the invasion, proof that the special military operation was succeeding. Losing control of this corridor undermines that narrative. It sends a clear message. Even territory that Russia has claimed and fortified is not safe. It shows that Ukrainian forces, supported by Western intelligence and weaponry, can strike deep into occupied areas and disrupt Russia's war machine where it hurts the most. On the Ukrainian side, this marks a major strategic success. The land bridge was one of their top targets since early in the war. Ukrainian officials have often said that Crimea and the south can only be liberated once this corridor is severed. Now that it's collapsing, Ukraine has an opportunity to intensify its operations in the region. If they can keep the pressure on and make it impossible for Russia to repair or maintain these routes, they can gradually isolate Russian troops in the south from reinforcements and supplies coming from the north and east. For the soldiers on the ground, this translates into real changes. Russian troops may find themselves short on ammunition, food, and medical aid. Their heavy weapons may sit idle due to lack of fuel. They could become easier targets for Ukrainian forces who are better supplied and more mobile. For Ukrainian troops, this could boost morale, knowing that their strikes are working and that they're finally gaining leverage in a war that has often felt stuck in stalemate. But the collapse of the land bridge also increases the risks. When supply lines break down, desperation can set in. Russia may respond with harsher tactics, including mass missile strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure or attempts to open new fronts elsewhere. The Kremlin will likely frame this as a temporary setback and blame it on Western intervention. However, repairing or rerouting supply lines in a war zone takes time and resources, both of which are increasingly scarce for Russia. Let's talk about Crimea for a moment. Crimea depends heavily on the land bridge for basic necessities: food, fuel, construction materials, and electricity infrastructure. When that flow is disrupted, it affects not only the military, but also civilians living there. Reports have already surfaced of fuel shortages and price hikes in some parts of Crimea. If this continues, the population could start feeling the squeeze, which would be a major political problem for Moscow. Russia has spent years portraying Crimea as permanently integrated into the Russian Federation. But if it becomes a burden instead of a symbol of victory, that narrative could start to crumble. Strategically, the collapse puts Russian military planners in a bind. They can try to rebuild the damaged infrastructure, but that exposes their engineers and repair teams to continued Ukrainian strikes. They can reroute supplies through the Kerch Bridge, but that's risky given how often it's been targeted. Or they can shift to sea-based logistics, which are slower and limited in capacity. None of these options fully replace what the land bridge provided: a secure, continuous overland route for troops and equipment. For Ukraine's allies, this development validates the strategy of targeting logistics rather than engaging in costly frontal assaults. Western military advisors have long emphasized that winning the logistics war is as important as winning battles. If you can cut off an army's lifelines, you can defeat it without having to engage every soldier directly. That's exactly what Ukraine appears to be doing here, turning Russia's size and dependence on long supply chains into weaknesses. The collapse also has implications beyond the battlefield. It could influence diplomatic positions, peace negotiations, and international support. Western governments watching this unfold may see it as evidence that continued military aid to Ukraine is paying off. Meanwhile, countries sitting on the fence may start to question Russia's ability to maintain control over occupied territories. It shifts perceptions, and perception is powerful in war. Inside Russia, however, this news is likely to be downplayed or spun. State media may refer to it as a temporary disruption or blame Ukrainian terrorist attacks, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. The Russian military is stretched thin, struggling to replace equipment losses, and dealing with growing internal discontent. A logistical collapse of this magnitude only adds to the strain. This situation also raises questions about what comes next. Will Ukraine try to exploit this opening to launch deeper offensives toward Melitopol or Berdyansk? Will Russia double down and pour more resources into defending Crimea. Could this be the beginning of a larger shift in the war, where supply chain disruption becomes the main battlefield? These are the questions that military analysts are asking right now. From a global perspective, this development could mark the point where Russia's offensive ambitions begin to contract for good. Wars are often decided not just by who advances, but by who can sustain their advances. Russia's invasion has depended heavily on long, vulnerable supply routes stretching from its heartland to the front lines. The longer those routes remain under attack, the more difficult it becomes to maintain large-scale operations. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to innovate with long-range drones, missiles, and sabotage missions deep behind enemy lines. Each of these strikes adds pressure to the system. Even if Russia manages to repair one bridge, another could be taken out the next week. It's a war of endurance, and the collapse of the land bridge shows that Ukraine's strategy of attrition and disruption is working. In the coming months, we can expect Russia to increase its defensive posture, focusing on protecting what remains of its logistical network. Ukraine will likely continue hitting infrastructure targets while probing for weak points along the front. Both sides know that control of supply lines can decide the outcome of the war. For now, though, the message is clear. The collapse of Russia's land bridge is a major setback. It undermines the narrative of strength and control that Moscow has tried to maintain. It reveals the vulnerability of its military logistics and the effectiveness of Ukraine's long-range precision strikes. It's a turning point that may not end the war overnight, but could start to shift its momentum. If you've been following this conflict, you know that these moments, when infrastructure gives way and supply routes break, often mark deeper strategic changes ahead. Whether this leads to more Ukrainian gains or prompts Russia to escalate further remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. This war is entering a new phase where logistics, resilience, and endurance will matter more than ever. That's all for today's analysis. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll keep you updated as new information comes in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.